Hi! Welcome, my beautiful people of the internet. How are you? Are you hydrated? Are you well rested? Make sure you're taking good care of yourselves and get ready for another video on monsters. My name is Lucia and this is my channel where I talk about art and history and politics and pop culture, and today, zombies. As you might know, I'm currently doing a series where I look at different monsters from pop culture and ask the question, what is this creature hiding? What are we actually scared of here? What's the social anxiety that we're trying to understand and process through this scary guy? In 21st century pop culture, zombies are very associated with civilization's collapse, contagion, the fear of the other, and the notion of the multitude as a threat to individuality. The modern zombie is a gregarious creature that seems to mindlessly work together to consume the living and reproduce the species, much like a virus. But zombies weren't always like this. We owe much of our current understanding of the zombie to this guy.
You simply can't talk about zombies without talking about George A. Romero. Spanning 41 years, his 6-part zombie series, plus 2 remakes, introduced the world to an evolving vision and version of the monsters.
There's a pre-Romero and a post-Romero when it comes to zombies, as he can be credited with inventing the modern zombie. But as we're going to see, that was not his original intention. The historical origins of the zombie are tightly associated with the African slave trade and Haiti's religious beliefs, specifically Vodu. This video is going to be the first of 2. In this one, we'll look at the pre-Romero zombie. We'll see what a zombie is, why some see it as the flip side of the vampire, its ties to Vodu and its origins in Haiti's slave culture, what the rebranding did to our understanding of the zombie, and why Jordan Peele's film Get Out is a zombie film and a masterpiece that reclaims their original essence. So let's not wait 1 second more. Here we go. So, what is a zombie? According to James B. Twitchell, an American author and professor of English who has written extensively about monsters, the zombie is an utter cretin, a vampire with a lobotomy. Okay. They simply lumber about like dateless high school students before the prom. As opposed to the vampire, who is crafty, circumspect, and erotic, these are subhuman slugs. Whoa. Who hurt you, Professor Twitchell? This level of dislike sounds kind of personal, but there are a number of interesting things to look at here. It's absolutely true that zombies lack the glamour that graces their vampiric counterparts. As Jamie Russell points out in his anthology on zombie cinema, Book of the Dead, there are no aristocrats, blue bloods, or celebrities among zombies. No big-name stars or instantly recognizable faces. Just low-rent, anonymous monsters who usually can't talk, can barely walk, and spend most of their energy trying to hold their decomposing bodies together. I feel so seen. Sorry, I felt the need to throw some self-defeating millennial humor in there just to say that honestly it's so cringe, we need to stop that. For much of the 20th century, counting a few exceptions like Romero's cult classics, zombie films were largely forgettable, often relegated to the B-movie realm. The zombies themselves are hard to romanticize because they are interchangeable. They have no individual traits. In fact, their lack of individuality is their defining trait. It's no surprise that the vampire is regarded as the opposite of the zombie because while they are both members of the undead gang, one has its origins in the aristocrat and the other in the slave. They are 2 sides of the same class struggle coin. Historically, the zombie has strong ties to both class and race, and I do believe that the sentiment expressed by Professor Twitchell here, which could pass as a quirkily strong personal dislike for one monster in favor of the other, ironically reflects some of the negative biases that Western society has displayed against both Black people and the lower classes, opposing them to the positive biases we have towards the white higher classes. The vampire is physically attractive, whereas the zombie is repulsive. The vampire has intelligence and refinement, is cunning and charismatic, whereas the zombie is a blank slate with no inner life, just plain muscle. The vampire inhabits castles and other magnificent places where the zombie roams in the open, homeless. The vampire's consumption of blood keeps them youthful.
It is your blood that shall keep me beautiful.
While the zombie's consumption of flesh does not stop their decay. So the second is not strategic, it's just destructive. Zombies are slow, subhuman slugs, he says, whereas vampires are erotic creatures with superpowers. Essentially, both are undead beings that consume the living, but one is sexy and the other one is gross. Interestingly, many of those traits were attached to the zombie in its 20th century rebranding, when it stopped being a creature from a black belief system to enter the horror mainstream targeted to white audiences. Let's have a look at that. The origins of the zombie can be traced back to Haitian Vodu, which was developed by African slaves who were taken to the island from the 1500s, first by the Spanish and then by the French. This religion is a hybrid of various kinds of Western African animisms and Roman Catholicism. It has been very much maligned in the West, usually referred to as voodoo. In Vodu, a person is comprised of two souls, which are called the gros bon ange, the big good angel, and the petit bon ange, or the small good angel. The first represents the life force of a person and their mechanical bodily functions, and the second represents their identity, what makes them them. Becoming a vessel for a god is an integral part of certain Vodu rituals, where a person enters in a state of trance that allows the god to speak through them.
Tambour et grand chemin son rythme. Chaque loi a un rythme tambour. On va boire un zéli choisir. On va boire un choisir. Et puis on choisit cette loi ça.
For a god to take hold of a body, the petit bon ange, the identity of the person, needs to be cast out. Now, if a person can be separated from their body in a Vodu rite, a malignant sorcerer could potentially achieve the same thing by means of magic or medicine outside of those official ceremonies. He or she could then control the body of a person who has been devoid of their will, their petit bon ange, and force them to do their deeds and labor for them. That's how the zombie is born. In The Serpent and the Rainbow, anthropologist Wade Davis investigated what supposedly went on in the process of zombification. According to him, the process is believed to be achieved through the expert administration of a drug containing tetrodotoxin, the neurotoxin produced by pufferfish and other animals in nature. This drug incapacitates the body, suppressing the pulse and eliminating all vital signs, so the victim appears to be dead. After the victim was buried, the witch doctor or sorcerer could go back to their grave to dig them up and administer a counter potion that would bring them back to life with no will or notion of their own identity, like a husk. It's easy to understand the absolute horror of being turned into a zombie for people who had been enslaved for generations. Instead of an escape into paradise, death might just be the beginning of an eternity of work under a different master, the voodoo sorcerer. As Sarah Juliet Loro and Karen Embry write in their Zombie Manifesto, humanity defines itself by its individual consciousness and its personal agency. To be a body without a mind is to be subhuman, animal. To be a human without agency is to be a prisoner, a slave. Becoming a zombie implies continuing to be controlled and dehumanized after death, finding no release or absolution. Horror in the Haitian zombie story does not stem from being attacked by the undead, but from becoming one. Being turned into a zombie is losing your individuality, inner life, and consciousness, which is the last refuge of a slave. This zombie does not seek to infect others, to reproduce itself, or to consume human flesh. They don't move in swarms, they are individual people, captives at the mercy of the sorcerer who re-enslaved them. They conduct themselves normally, walking, talking, and acting to achieve whatever commands the sorcerer gives them. In A History of Gothic Fiction, Mark Manelis writes about how the Jamaican slave owner and apologist for slavery, Brian Edwards, said, "In countries where slavery is established, the leading principle on which government is supported is fear." He argued in 1793 that the slaves were legally purchased captives, fairly taken in a just war, who, upon capture, had agreed to perpetual labor in exchange for life, deferring execution. The state of slavery is nothing but a state of death postponed. The colony of Saint-Domingue gained independence from French rule and adopted the name of Haiti in 1804, after a violent revolution that closely followed the French Revolution on the mainland. I thoroughly recommend this video by William C. Fox on the subject because I'm unable to do it justice here, and it really is a fascinating story that deserves to be told. But to give you a sense of how huge an event this was, the Haitian Revolution is the largest and most successful slave uprising in history, and Haiti became the first and only country founded by slaves. France and the other European powers, along with the very young US, saw this rebellion initially with disbelief and then with terror.
Trouillot argues that observers found any explanation that worked around the disbelief. The English were meddling, the plantation owners mismanaged, the number of participants in the revolt were small. Anything was conceivable except for the possibility that the slaves were rebelling for their own deeper reason.
Many Western sources portrayed this rebellion as a consequence of the slaves' and natives' inherent savagery. European audiences consumed with horror and excitement the lurid stories about brutal executions taking place across the ocean, looking worriedly at the rest of the colonies. Descriptions of rebellions typically retailed examples of slave depravity, indicating how slaves acted without restraint. Dear, oh dear, how could those savages respond so violently to centuries of enslavement and brutality? Could they not ask politely for their freedom? You know, like the French had just done. I'm sure the likes of Brian Edwards would have been most reasonable. Fearing that Haiti would set an example that other colonies would eagerly follow, the European powers did their best to hamper the new nation's development. The country was subsequently isolated by the international community. The French only recognized it as a sovereign state in 1825, and only after signing a treaty that forced Haiti to pay compensation for its independence for the sum of 150 million francs, which Haiti only finished paying in 1947. Adjusted to inflation, that was estimated to have been $560 million in 2022, above $600 million in 2025. This crippled Haiti's economy for centuries to come, but it is often avoided when discussing the impoverished situation of the country today. Not only did the European colonial powers do everything they could to ensure that Haiti didn't flourish as a country, but they also worked to create a damaging narrative about its people and their beliefs.
From the beginning, Vodu is seen as at the very heart of revolutionary desire, intention, and ultimately power. Vodu became sort of symbolic of all that was un-Western, undeveloped, uncivilized, and all of these things. And that narrative has been used, up to the present day to justify imperial interventions in Haiti.
Vodu was portrayed as a demonic and holy religion to instigate fear and morbid fascination in Western audiences. The zombie, like the cannibal, is an ideologically motivated rhetorical device deployed to demonstrate and establish the moral superiority of civilized colonial authority over the barbarous slaves. But the global popularization of the zombie only came about in 1929, when the American explorer William Seabrook published the highly sensational travel book The Magic Island, which contains the first English-language description of the creature. Haiti had been under US occupation since 1915, and similarly to European powers 100 years earlier, the US needed a narrative that justified their intervention.
Wild tales of Vodu ceremonies and, sacrifices and blood rituals that then very easily became, not animal sacrifices, but human sacrifices or baby sacrifices. That unfamiliarity got transformed into something that made for good media.
The Magic Island became a huge success, and from that moment on, the zombie became a regular in Western media. But it wasn't until 1968 that we saw a crucial change in its representation. There is, I would claim, a slightly or not so slightly perverse inversion of the zombie's position that occurred in the shift between the Haitian zombie and the modern zombie. This shift was largely brought about by George Romero's 1968 film, The Night of the Living Dead. In this film, the radiation coming from a satellite provides an incredibly vague excuse for the dead to rise from their tombs and attack the living.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
A group of people get stranded and besieged by the undead in a house in Pennsylvania, and soon tensions arise between the two aspirants to dominant male, the barking coward Harry and the resourceful Chad Ben. By today's standards, it's not really a scary movie if you're over the age of 8, but it's a really fun film, so I thoroughly recommend it. Night of the Living Dead is widely acknowledged as the first modern zombie film, establishing some of the tropes that we've seen in hundreds of films since. Let me take a deep breath before I number a few. The zombie as a multitude hostile to the living, its cannibalistic drive, the widespread, ever-growing threat that can't seem to be managed by the regular authorities, the siege scenario where an inside space needs to be protected from the outside, the rapid fall and reconfiguration of the political and social structures, the infighting among the living, the element of contagion, specifically through the bite, and the vulnerabilities of the creature, a shot or a strong hit to the head. These are tropes that we take so much for granted that it's hard to imagine how it must have been for audiences to encounter them for the first time. And the funny thing is that Romero never intended for these creatures to be read as zombies.
Zombies, to me, were, those boys in the Caribbean. I thought I was creating a completely new monster. The neighbors suddenly turned into flesh eaters, ghouls, and that's what I call them, ghouls.
So Romero didn't think of his creations as zombies, but as ghouls. It was the public who organically resignified them as zombies. And that's interesting, because in doing that, this perverse shift occurs. Because the thing is, before Romero, the zombies were not the villains in the story, but the victims. What originally constituted a very real belief that could be read as a manifestation of the fear and anxiety that black slaves felt in the face of their powerlessness against colonial forces is turned on its head. Suddenly, the zombies are transformed into a mindless, dangerous, brutal mob. And it echoes with the stories about the Haitian Revolution, with that characterization of slaves as savages that would turn to violence unless managed with an iron fist. Even in 1931's White Zombie, which can be classified as the first Hollywood zombie film, the zombies are not the villains, but the tools of the actual villain, the voodoo witch and sugarcane plantation master, Murder Legendre. Mind, however, that in that case the zombie victims were white, as was Legendre, played by Hungarian-American actor Bela Lugosi. This undoubtedly helps to visually remove explicit commentary on historical black slavery, avoiding controversy and allowing the plot of the film to focus on the theme of lust that had been so well received in Lugosi's Dracula the year before. So, be it by accident or not, American cinema of the 20th century contributed to obscuring the origins of the zombie in African slavery. The modern zombie is created by taking certain aspects of the Caribbean zombie and completely resignifying them as a danger towards us. Us, the main characters trying to survive, the healthy ones, the ones with free will, or what is the same, the living. And them, the slaves, the swarm, the infected, the dead. And there is symbolism in that, whether we want it or not. And again, this is not Romero's vision. It is not the message of his films. Romero's work is explicitly progressive. I believe there is zero intention in his work to appropriate or distort black history or black myths. What I aim to make is an observation of how things are often organically digested and reconfigured by the mainstream, and what is lost and gained in the process in terms of meaning. Things that just happen don't just happen, they have a context. Who makes films has an impact on the kind of stories that become canon. If filmmakers are more interested in stories about lust than racialized forced labor, like in White Zombie, they will make a film that obscures the second to focus on the first. It's a choice, it's a selection. And eventually, iteration after iteration, all reference to the original metaphor is lost. That is, until someone like Jordan Peele shows up. Get Out is a zombie film, and a great one at that. I've never seen it promoted as a zombie film, but I would argue that's because we are so used to Romero's Zombie that we fail to recognize Get Out for what it is. A film that reclaims the original Haitian zombie narrative, traces back its ties to racism and slavery, and brilliantly reconnects it with the American present. And it's so good. There will be spoilers for the film in what follows, so if you haven't seen it, you've been warned. Let's do a recap, shall we? Get Out tells the story of Chris, a young black photographer who is invited by his white girlfriend Rose to meet her parents during a family weekend at their home. The Armitage parents, hypnotherapist Missy and neurosurgeon Dean, present themselves as progressive, upper-class liberal people, often trying to make a point of how unbothered they are by the fact that their daughter is dating a black man.
I would have voted for Obama for a third term if I could. Best president in my lifetime, hands down.
However, things start getting creepy when Chris notices the strange behavior of the family's black servants. Over the weekend, white guests start coming to the house for the family's annual get-together, and he eventually realizes that the Armitages ran an operation where black victims are sold to old white people in search of young, able bodies to transfer their brains and their consciousness to. The mother uses hypnosis to nullify the will of the victims and imprison them in their own bodies, where they get to witness themselves being taken over by the conscious minds of their white buyers. In this film, Jordan Peele returns the zombies to the position of victims, individualizing them so that the audience can identify with them. The hypnotized people in the film present obvious resemblances with the Haitian zombies. They can move, they can talk, but they are husks at the mercy of their masters. If you recall at the beginning of the video, I said that it's difficult to connect with zombies because they are interchangeable. Their lack of identity makes them entirely alien and unknowable. But here, you know who they are and what they've been through. In the process of hypnosis, Missy, the mother, drives the identity of the victim, the bon ange, if you will, to what she calls the sunken place, from which they are absolutely powerless, while the white enslaver takes control of the life force and body, or the bon ange. There is something incredibly cruel in the way in which Missy achieves this, because she gains the trust of her victims and encourages them to go to their darkest places so she can then trap them in their most vulnerable and open psychological states. That "you can trust me" followed by absolute betrayal is terrifying. This is part of a mirroring game between the overt, violent white supremacy that hides underneath this apparently well-meaning family and the racist microaggressions that we witness through Chris. Jordan Peele describes them as two sides of the same coin.
What if that was the type of horror that is actually behind the surface? The assimilation. What if it was the admiring of black bodies and cultures? These are both parts of the monster of racism.
He talks about the party scene, which is possibly one of the most haunting ones in the film. And the thing that I really like is how the banality of these white characters is portrayed.
Okay.
Oh, not bad. Hey, Nielsen. So, is it true? Is it better?
Wow. Fair skin has been in favor for the past, couple of hundreds of years. But now the pendulum is swung back. Black is in fashion.
It's just so casual. The film doesn't really dwell on how grotesquely evil they are, which they are. This is just people who feel entirely and naturally entitled to someone else's body, to black bodies. They feel entitled to stare, entitled to comment, entitled to grace them with a compliment. That entitlement, of course, is also taken to its last consequences in the film, but we get to witness that iceberg from microaggressions all the way through slavery and murder as different intensities of the same belief system. And we don't do that through backward redneck characters, but through liberal upper-class intellectuals. And I love that because while of course there is plenty of overt and covert racism among all kinds of populations, he chooses to point his finger at the educated, wealthy elite that actually runs the country instead of further demonizing the lower classes.
These fears of mine, I've never seen them portrayed in film. The whole process of figuring out what this movie was about digging deep and exploring my fears first.
This is very much what I was talking about earlier. Each director speaks from their perspective. inevitably. And what we see in Romero's films is Romero's fears and obsessions that are influenced by his upbringing and who he is. And these are gripping and valid as well, but isn't it interesting that when an African-American director makes a social thriller about his own fears, the original zombie re-emerges? A whole constellation of historical injustice and violence suddenly gets materialized and is visible where it wasn't before. Isn't that stunning and important? And the best thing is that just because a person is creating something from their specific experience doesn't mean that we can't connect with it, much to the contrary. Of course, your own lived experience will condition how you experience something.
I often thought about the movie in terms of what the black audience will need and what the white audience will be watching. I just had to acknowledge that black people watching this scene would recognize that fear. For the white audience, what I wanted this scene to do was to put them on the page of what it feels like to be a black man in a suburban neighborhood at night.
That's precisely how points of connection are created and how empathy is built. At the beginning of the keynote, he ponders how, before releasing the film, he was worried about it being racially divisive. And he makes a key point on the importance of how we, as an audience, are absolutely aligned with Chris.
I felt this feeling that, like, by the middle of the movie, everyone in the theater was Chris. Everyone is looking through the same set of eyes.
There is no point in the film in which we don't root for Chris or feel for the people who have been enslaved, the zombies. The zombies are unequivocally the victims, and through brilliant storytelling, we are made to have a glimpse of the anguish of what it means to lose the agency of your body, to be dispossessed of it, but also the relief and the self-assertion of fighting back and being able to leave. This film brings people together because it makes us empathize with the slaves, with the zombies. And it also vindicates them through Chris's victory. He resists and he escapes, and he does so ultimately with the help of a friend, emphasizing the need for close human ties within communities and movements of resistance. Okay, so we've reached the end of our trip through the zombies' origins, where we've explored the nature of the fear behind these monsters and its ties to race in its pre-Romero version. In the next video, I will be dissecting the politics of the zombie apocalypse, so we will go full post-Romero with that, and I think it's also going to be very interesting, so keep tuned. Thank you so much for watching this. Please tell me your thoughts, feelings, or whatever you want to share in the comments. If you liked it, please don't forget to give it a like. And if you want to stay up to date with my upcoming videos, do subscribe. It's very exciting to see the channel grow day by day. Okay, bye.